The 117th edition of the Roy's Boys podcast starts right now.
Carolina basketball family is the strongest there's ever been, there ever will be.
Nate Humphrey hands King Rice the ball. Pushes into Hubert Davis. 8 seconds. Davis trying to get free. Over to Fox. Fox, baseline. Up for the shot. Good! Off the glass! Oklahoma calls timeout, but the game is over! The game is over! Carolina has upset number 1 Oklahoma! And ready on his second attempt. That one is no good! They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered Marvin. He scores!
With 20 seconds left to play. Goes back to Michael Jordan. Jumper from out on the left. Good! 63-62. 13, 12, 11. Georgetown with one timeout. Fred Brown looking. Oh, way to Worthy. Worthy 5. The Tar Heels are going to win the national championship.
Carolina with foul. He takes the timeout. They're out of timeout. Technical foul. Technical foul. Brown gets it into Williams. Here comes Williams front court. Williams on the drive. Gets it back out to Head. Long outside shot. Short rebounded. May. It's over. Carolina has won the national championship. And how about them Tar Heels? They are the national champions.
The Tar Heels are the national daggum champions.
You competed. And that's what it takes to win big-time games. You got to compete. You do it with your brain, and you got to do it with your heart, too. And that's pretty doggone good.
From QCBroadcasting.com, this is the Roy's Boys podcast with your host, Josh Marlowe.
Hey, everybody. Welcome you into another edition of the Roy's Boys podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Today's show, we've got multiple topics to cover. We will look ahead to tomorrow's game against Louisville, 4 o'clock from the KFC Yum Center in Louisville, Kentucky. But first off, Anthony, the other day on the football podcast, we discussed whether Carolina in football could ever win the national championship. Interesting discussion in the offseason. Well, we're going to have an in-season discussion over something that ESPN had Jay Billis come on and talk about the other day, which is the Carolina Dynasty coming to a conclusion under Roy Williams? I did not tell you this was going to be a part of the episode. I imagine this has caught you off guard, and just want to hear your thoughts.
That's the dumbest thing I think I've ever heard in my entire life. Considering that if you look at the 2020 recruiting class, you have a historically good class coming in. Also, if you want to go back and look at this class that you brought in, most people were of the belief that Cole Anthony was, and this was talked about by multiple people, including one quote early in the year from George Karl, who had been at camp, to say that Cole Anthony could be the best point guard to ever play at North Carolina. Things did not work out that way. There are a lot of injury issues that have hurt the Tar Heels this year. Again, no excuse for them being 10-16. They should be better than that. And Roy has taken ownership for a lot of that as well. But to think that this dynasty is over with Roy Williams means that most people are just not doing their research. And I am also here to tell you that even when Roy Williams leaves, if they make the right hire, this is nowhere near over. This is Carolina. They will not go anywhere at college basketball anytime soon, considering that they were called on PTI the other day by Michael Wilbon and Tony Kornheiser, the pinnacle of college basketball, meaning that it can't get any better than Carolina. So, yeah, that's the dumbest thing that I think I've ever heard in my entire life.
I think it would have been different if this was a second, a third, a fourth year where Carolina's, below 500, not competing to make the NCAA tournament, let alone maybe even the NIT at this rate. This is 1 year. And Jay Billis brought up multiple great points to defend his argument. probably be, barring some turnaround, the first losing season for Roy Williams in his coaching career. And you think about the amount of just losses that scientifically don't add up. We went through them the other day, where Carolina's lost 6 times where they had a 70 or better % chance to win the game. Like, mathematically, it doesn't make sense. They've lost so many games that they controlled for 37, 38 minutes that normally in sports, you'll see where you're really bad in that department one year. Normally the next year it evens out. But, I mean, I think that's the thing. This is 1 year of Carolina not being Carolina. I think there was more of an argument to ask this question back when the NCAA first got on campus, back in the early part of the 2010 decade, back when Marcus Page's freshman and sophomore teams were losing 10, 11, 12 games. That might have been more understandable then, just because those teams were nowhere near close to competing for an ACC regular season title or playing in the second weekend of the tournament. You got to think, Carolina, as of last year, been the number 1 seed 3 out of the last 4 NCAA tournaments, played in 2 national title games. And now all of a sudden 10 and 16, and it's like sky's over, and it's, end of the world. I just don't get where ESPN thought this was the right time to bring up this kind of discussion, considering the fact that, like you said, next year you've got arguably the best recruiting class Roy Williams has brought in since he got to Chapel Hill. There's no way Carolina stays down for long. So, anything else you want to add to that topic?
I mean, not really. I think he kind of hit everything on the head there. I mean, yeah, like you said, this team's 3 years away from a national championship win. I saw someone on there the other day that was having an argument on Twitter with a fan saying 3 years in college basketball is a huge period of time. It's not really. And like you said, I mean, this is a team that last year was, 3 out of the last 4 years they were 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. So that's just not magically going to disappear and never come back. This is one off year, and that's pretty much the argument that everybody's trying to make against Roy Williams, is to say, well, this is the first time he's ever had a losing season. Maybe he's just losing his touch. And I just don't get how you can go from being a team that at a time last year, towards the end of the year, many people thought were the favorites to make a run in the NCAA tournament and win the national championship, to a year later having an off year and saying this guy just doesn't have it anymore. And honestly, they should probably look to move on. If there are people that honestly think that, it's just, I don't know what to tell you anymore, because as we've seen, a lot of the guys that we thought were going to be good haven't really had a lot of success. And, that's why it's going to be interesting when Carolina does end up having to find Roy's replacement, who they end up going after, because nothing's a sure thing. So I'm good. I think Carolina's still going to be fine. I'm not overly concerned about that, or else that opinion would have been voiced on here. But at the same time, I think next year there's there was a point brought up to me today about a fan that I was talking with for a little while. This offseason is going to be interesting because a lot of these guys are going to be pushed harder than they've probably ever been pushed in their life, because the goal is going to be to not let this happen again, not even come close to let this happening again next year.
Yeah, I had this interesting conversation with my dad, ironically, the other day. We were talking, just because the season's been a disappointment. How did he get his reaction to Roy Williams dropping the F-bomb in the post-game press conference? He voiced he was kind of displeased with the use of the expletive. But I was telling him, it's funny, you look at 2 of the 3 runs to the national title under Roy Williams were fueled by NCAA heartbreak the year before. 09 was from an 08 loss to Kansas in the Final Four. You were down 40-12 in the first half. 17 was on the heels of losing on the buzzer in 16. This team's going to have the motivation entering next year because they didn't make the NCAA tournament. They didn't make the NIT, and you bring a really good point. The amount of level they're going to be pushed is going to be to the furthest degree they've ever imagined because of just how bad this year's gone. In some ways, they are an embarrassment to the program that we view in the eyes. So, as we close this topic down, I don't think the end is near for North Carolina under Roy Williams. He signed an 8-year extension last year. I don't think he would have re-upped for almost a decade longer if he didn't think this program was going to compete at the highest level under him. I feel like if he felt he was losing the program to some capacity, he'd be smart enough and he's unselfish enough to get out of the way, let someone else come in, run the show, so that Carolina basketball can remain, like the guys on PTI said, the pinnacle of success in the sport and in college athletics. So with that, let's move on and talk about Saturday's game against Louisville. It's hard to say Carolina doesn't have a chance to win the game because every time we didn't think, they didn't have a chance, they should have won the ball game. They'll go to Louisville, according to ESPN's Basketball Power Index, just a 9.3% chance to win. The Cardinals are coming off a win on their last outing at home against Syracuse. They thumped the Orange by 24, which was a big game for the Oranges. They're trying to qual into the NCAA tournament. Prior to that, they had lost 2 in a row on the road to mediocre teams in the conference. But Louisville's a team that, when we get the bracket on Selection Sunday, most likely will be on the top 3 seed lines. They've got a lot of experienced talent. Team was a lot of media's preseason predictions to win the national championship. Jordan Nora, last year's ACC Most Improved Player, has come back and has put together an All-American type campaign. Chris Mack's one of the best young coaches in college basketball. It's going to be a difficult task, to say the least, for Carolina not only to win the game, but to compete.
Well, I mean, look at the prior 2 games before that game against Syracuse. You would think Carolina's definitely got a chance, and you talked about Jordan Nwora, and he has not really been great here over those last 3 games. I'd scored 1 total point in the 2 losses prior to the game against Syracuse the other night. Now, I did score 17 in that game, but was just 5 of 18 from the field. So after a great start to the season, he's cooled off a bit. And the good news is that outside of him, the Cardinals don't have a single guy that scored over 10 points per game this season. So that's the good news. The problem is they're an extremely balanced team. They're a much deeper team than Carolina is. And at this point, again, this is the time of, with where this team is at right now and the time of year that it is, Carolina's reached the point where every single opponent that they're going to play the rest of the way, outside of maybe Wake Forest, who will probably have nothing to play for as well, unless you consider that fact that they may be playing for Danny Manning's job. At this point, everybody's playing for something more than you're playing for. Louisville's playing for a chance to probably still remain on the top 2 lines. They're also still playing for a chance to be the number 1 seed in the ACC tournament. And the fact that you have to go there, which has been a place that you have had a lot of trouble with in the past when you've been good, is not going to help you. But again, this is a team that, I don't think anybody's going to overlook, but it's a team that, even though they haven't really been that good, they always find ways to play up to their competition in this case. And I think, again, it'll probably be another one of those games where Carolina does enough things to have themselves in the game, but when it comes down to those late clutch moments, you have a feeling that guys like Jordan Nwora, Ryan McMahon, Malik Williams, who have been